Maciej Jakubik is the Executive Director of CEEP, a passionate and savvy promoter of the balanced energy transition in accordance with technological neutrality principle, as the association works to shape the EU energy and climate policy by taking into account the interests and views of Central European companies. We'll be talking about all this immediately. Hi Maciej, thank you for taking the time for this conversation. Please, let's start by telling us a few words on how you live this pandemic crisis. Romania has been in state of emergency for almost 2 weeks now, with the ever more drastic restriction introduced every day. What is the general situation in Warsaw now, and how has your professional routine changed in the last weeks?
Good morning, and I'm happy to be with you and to see you in good health and safe, because this is now the most important situation, and of course we should be cautious, and we should be taking care of our health. I was in Brussels till recently. I just came to Warsaw when the severe restriction has started, so it was 10 days ago. So I can share with you some of the views. How was the situation in Brussels till 15th or 14th of March, and then now in Warsaw. So starting from today in Warsaw, we have very severe strict restrictions over the meetings, walking outside, even leaving homes. It's only for very essential purposes. It means work, food, grocery shops, pharmacies, drugs, and so on. But there is restriction on any kind of meetings up more than 2 people. Also, the restrictions on moving between the cities and between the, let's say, friends and or families. So these are very strict prohibitions what you can do. So simply we stay at home, and just for kind of mental and health, me personally with my family, we are going for a 1 hour walk around, let's say, a small park nearby, just to have some fresh air. In Brussels, however, I'm in contact with my colleagues from the office who stayed in Brussels for this time. The restrictions also from couple of days ago was introduced this kind of similar restrictions. So there is also this situation that the streets are actually quite empty. There's very few cars. Yesterday, my colleague journalist from Brussels called me saying that he's coming back from kind of press conference that took place yesterday, and he met on his way home just the 1 car. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so this is something unusual. And
yes, so and more or less is the same situation here in Bucharest, and I suppose in every large country throughout Europe and throughout the world. I saw also some footage on the television this morning, and it seems to be quite the same all over the world. What about the measures introduced in Poland by the authorities in order to reduce the social and economic impact of the pandemic? In Romania, there are a number of these kind of measures. I'm curious how's the situation in Poland.
There is a package of economic stimulus proposed by the government a couple of days ago, which include the kind of loans for the small business, also tax exemptions or social security exemptions. The opinion on that are mixed. So, of course, some of the employers, the entrepreneurs, they claim that it's not enough, and the government should do more, because the business just simply stopped since 2 weeks, and they still must have pay or the taxes, VAT, and so on. So now the government is in, let's say, consultation process with some associations of the employers in order to improve this this package. Also, central bank announced that it will massively buy the bonds of the government and in this way put the money to the market. So of course the government is a part of, let's say, health and security issues. The government is trying to prepare for this, let's say, post-virus phase, how to save the companies, how to help them in order to continue their economic activity. One thing very interesting, what I saw in some social media, is that the individuals are aware of this situation. So, for example, some of my friends or colleagues who has the small business, like I know some small shops or something, they managed to negotiate with the owner of their offices, of their shops, and so on, to reduce significantly the rent for coming 2-3 months. So it's also interesting way for how the society is responding on that, and how the economic entrepreneurship is, let's say, cooperating. So in my understanding is the way that let's say, the owners of the offices or the shops, they understood. So it's better to have half of the rent than when the company is going bankrupt and they have nothing because they will not find another one. Yeah.
Yes, in Romania there is an emergency ordinance by the government that talks about a suspension in payment for the rental amount of money for 3 months, I think. And it's still quite complicated to understand for any of us how such a provision in a real economy when we're talking about contracts between parts. But there is also this idea of a temporary suspension of payment of the utilities bills for 2 or 3 months in Romania. Have you heard of something similar in Poland or any other country? And what do you think about such an idea?
There is no such an idea so far in Poland. I haven't heard at least about it. There was a regular legislative process on the Legislative Act, which should reduce the electricity prices in general for maybe not vulnerable consumers, but for poorer parts. There was a legislative process on the Act which should reduce the electricity bills, or let's say stop the rise of the electricity bills, because as probably in Romania, Poland has seen in the last 2 years quite a significant increase of the electricity prices at wholesale market, because of especially because of the growing ETS prices, EU allowances prices. And the government decided in 2019 to introduce the bill which, let's say, freeze the price of the electricity, and promised that it will going to continue in 2020. But there is no any such a, let's say, particular measure regarding now to the COVID, to the coronavirus spread of the halting the bills. However, again, this is kind of social responsibility of the companies that Polish biggest supplier of gas, PGNiG, announced that it will not, let's say, cut off the gas supplies to the customers that do not pay their bills in the coming 2-3 months. Also, there was this kind of declaration from the biggest energy suppliers.
I see, I understand. Thank you for the information on the situation in Poland. I will say a few words about how is Romania coping with this idea, also introduced last year with capping the prices for electricity and gas. And here in Bucharest, the authorities decided to get back to a liberalized market for natural gas starting from July 1st. And this is also a subject of discussion at the moment, if this specific date is appropriate at the moment, as many analysts anticipated that getting back to a liberalized market would lead to increased prices for the households. But at the same time, at the moment, with the current situation, it seems that the prices might be, in fact, lower than those in 2019, because the demand is much lower. It was a not so harsh winter, and also the demand from the industry is supposed to be quite suppressed at the moment. But that it's interesting because it seems like it is obvious that the economy works much better than the politician might predict. However, I would kindly ask you to move the topic of our discussion on the Brussels topics, and I would ask you what you think about those topics that were considered urgent during the last years, and the Green Deal in front of all this, but also decarbonization, renewed investment in energy efficiency, digitalization, and so on and so forth. Do you think that these topics do still constitute the priorities for the decision makers in Brussels? And how have the priorities changed for Central European energy partners at the moment?
The situation is very uncertain, and uncertainty, this is the word which is now spreading around everywhere. So what can I say? It's kind of speculations, because of course there's no any kind of declarations from the Commission that the Green Deal will be halted or will be revised or whatsoever. Even there are some opinions from the Franz Timmermans, Vice President of the Commission, or from the members of the European Parliament, that the, let's call it, show must go on. Yeah, so we will continue whatever it happens, but it will not continue whatever it happens. It will change significantly what is inside the Green Deal, and not only talking about the timeline, because the timeline now is of course different than it was proposed back in December, because now the institutions works, let's say, in half, because some of the employees are at home, some of them are taking care of kids and so on. There is no meetings, no consultations. There are of course public consultations ongoing that you can apply online and voice your opinion, but of course all the files will be delayed. What will happen with the files that are now in the Parliament? Because we have among the Green Deal, and I prepared for you nice our, let's say, calendar that we have. Can you see it?
Yes.
So this is the Green Deal legislative calendar that we have, and we have two files that are now in the legislative act that now in the Parliament. One is Just Transition Fund, and the second is climate law. So this is the ordinary legislative procedure which must be continued. But again, the Parliament does not work, and there is no sessions. There was only mini session yesterday that when they voted only, or today when they voted, they are supposed to vote the budget issues in order to switch the money for the fight with coronavirus. So of course the files will be delayed. There will be longer period of proceedings, because Parliament and the Council, so the two institutions that are working on the legislative acts, will have to get back to the normal way of work. Yeah, and it will be only after the summertime. So let's say we have 2-3 months of the delays. But what is most important is that the Green Deal was supposed to have a huge investment into the renewables, into the restructuring of the electricity grid, on the development of the new way of moving the energy carriers, so hydrogen and so on. And these are the investment that needs a lot of money, the massive financing capabilities. And now when we are going to have the kind of recession and a lot of bankruptcy, the focus of the governments, national governments, will be to save as much as possible of the economy as a whole, not concentrate only on the energy sector, their needs and their transformation. The energy transition will go anyway, because this is the direction that we see. So we can say that Green Deal will stay as a final goal till 2050. But for the next 2-3 years, I think it will not be the political priority of the national member states. And I think that the Commission will have to also revise somehow it.
But I believe, in my opinion, there is very complicated for the companies operating in the coal sector, because they were promised some significant amounts of money in order to move from using coal to other types of activity. At least in Romania, this is the situation, and they are probably not going to receive this money, not in a foreseeable future, at least, because there is no European budget approved, there is no such fund approved, as you mentioned earlier. And if we are going to go on with this energy transition by itself as business as usual, that would mean a sudden and painfully death for some companies in the coal sector.
This is true. We were not satisfied with the proposal of the Just Transition Fund in terms of its budget, which was proposed by the Commission. It's only, we can say, 7.5 billion for the whole European Union. It's not very significant money if we want to see the tangible impact on the sector, because the transformation is very costly, and there's different estimations of the cost of this transformation, which goes even up to 200 billion annually for the whole European Union. So if we put 7 billion for 7 years, it means 1 billion only per year. It's not definitely the money that it's available. And the more, there are some countries that in bigger need than the others. Yes, so this is unfortunately Poland, which has the coal based energy sector, but it is also part of the Romanian, important part of the Romanian mix, of the Bulgarian mix, of Czech Republic, and so on. Even in Germany, it's also very, very significant part. So these needs are enormous, yeah. And but the budget is very shy, let's say, very timid, and not answering to the needs.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Maybe a last comment on the priorities for the CEEP. How you see them now for the next months?
I would repeat what I said: uncertainty. So we had quite a clear plan what we want to do and what we want to focus on in 2020, and it was, of course, let's say, Green Deal in general, and in particular, Just Transition Fund. The revision of the Trans-European Network, so PCI projects, which also was supposed to start in after summertime, in autumn, and also the revision of the European trading system, which was supposed to be proposed in June 2021. But again, what I said, it's quite difficult now to have a long-term planning, because for short-term planning, I can say that we're working on, let's say, analytical basis now. But actually, today is 26. Today we were supposed to have an event, the discussion with European Policy Center on Just Transition Fund, indeed, with the DG Regio officials, with Mr. Buzek, member of the European Parliament, and colleagues from the companies and the think tanks. And yeah, but it should be exactly right now from 10 to 12 on 26.
Yeah,
so,
this is also true for us with Energynomics. We had an event scheduled for today, our spring cocktail, the 7th edition. It was supposed to happen this evening, but we had to postpone it for April 14th. And now most probably we'll have it totally online as a video conference on 14th of April. Thank you very much, Maciej, for this conversation, and we'll keep on touch, stay healthy, and enjoy the time with your family.